Item 12.8 on page 418. At this stage, I'll hand the meeting over to the Deputy Mayor, as I've declared an interest.
I have a question for the Director. Is that okay? Yes, Director. Yeah, we heard Mr. Mark Croxford talk about doing community consultation before the process goes down goes through what we've known before, and I know our practice is to do that later. I was just curious as to the reasons why we don't do community participation before we go through all that planning process. Could you explain that to us, please?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Essentially, the current community participation plan of council, which is council's adopted policy, is that we don't do pre-consultation for planning proposals. There's nothing in the legislation that requires council to do pre-consultation of planning proposals. There's also nothing that prevents it. So the option is open to council if it was a policy decision of council to do so. So the current community participation plan doesn't ask us to do that, and as such, council staff have followed the adopted position of council. If council wished to change that position, they could do so. However, that would come at a resource cost and a whole bunch of other implications for council that they would need to consider. In this case, this parcel of land was included in council's urban strategy. So as such, it's something that had been already considered by council and by the community. It isn't a new planning proposal that has not had any consultation. And when I have seen pre-consultation occur for planning proposals, in most cases it's when the land is not already in an agreed strategy. And it's one of the reasons why I didn't recommend any land for the local strategic planning statement, as we hadn't undertaken community consultation.
Just one other question. There is a time constraint on this?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, yes, there is a time constraint. The 90 days finishes on the 27th of June, and as such, the proponent could simply bypass council and go straight to the planning panel if they wish to do so.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I move the recommendation.
Would you like to speak to the recommendation, Councillor Brown?
I don't think there's much to speak towards. I think it makes a lot of sense. As the Director has said, there has been already community consultation in regards to this, and I didn't take too kindly to the Speaker last night inferring that council laws and council staff were not doing their job in any way, and we only found out at the last moment of that presentation that the Speaker actually lived at the western side of Gainsborough, right over near the highway, and near this particular plot of land. So I would have preferred that they actually disclosed that they were living adjacent to it, and that they might be an affected neighbour before implicating all of council laws and council staff. But other than that, I think the council staff have done an excellent job in detailing this, and this is a part of community consultation. This is an open meeting. This is an open book, and I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Seconder? No. Councillor Rice.
Has it been seconded? I wasn't going to second it.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
Councillor Watson.
I was just going to speak briefly against it, mostly because I wasn't impressed with what I read on the planning proposal itself on page 22. It just says that of the 4 trees on the lot, that one of them is a tree that contains hollows, and if the clearing of the hollow-bearing tree is required, that they would check out then what's living in it. I feel like if there is a hollow-bearing tree, it should be allowed to live for the duration of its natural life, and that the design should take that into account. So maybe eventually, when they, if they go ahead with the development application for this site, they may take it into account. But at the moment, that's my concern about it, and it's not specified that they intend to protect the tree. It just isn't if there in the planning proposal. So that's enough to make me not like it much.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have another question for the Director. and that is that if this goes through as a planning proposal, when it comes back, how quickly do you think that the proponent may put in a DA for this?
We've got to remember that through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, we've got to remember that it still needs to go through a planning proposal process. That's a very extensive process. There is a component of community consultation exhibition that would include all the precinct committees, surrounding neighbours, and it's at least 6 months to 12 months of a planning proposal process to go through. There is also steps of resolutions of council through that process as well, and the minister. So essentially that's got to be started and finished before any DA could be submitted to council.
Can I just ask one question too? In terms of things like a tree with hollows or the dry stone wall down the eastern side, is it at the planning proposal phase that we need to identify those, or is it at a later stage?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, it could be at both stages, so certainly it will be something that will be considered as part of the planning proposal, and then in the submissions to or the requests from departments or agencies, it could be something that could be highlighted. Certainly it could be included through policy, DCP, master plan. It would depend on the specifics of each of those requirements. Most likely considered at DA stage, but certainly we can highlight it through the process as well.
No further questions or speakers, then we'll put the motion, which is as printed. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against? The motion's carried, and I'll hand back to the Mayor.